Fired up about this episode of the On Friar podcast, brought to you by NBC7. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp, and we will be joined by one of our favorites whenever he's on the pod. We always love to pick his brain and get his perspective on the Padres and everything else in the baseball world. Eno Sarris of The Athletic. And hey, there's actual baseball news to talk about, sort of, Derek. Not official yet. Wandy Peralta. How about that? Maybe we'll do a good 45 minutes on Wandy.
Hey, left-handed relievers are great to do 45-minute podcasts on. It's tremendous radio. I mean, everyone wants to hear it.
Nothing else to talk about. And knowing Eno, I mean, he's a wealth of information, so he could probably cover the 45 minutes. I'd probably be done after about 2 or 3. But
We're talking about spin rate on his fastball.
Yeah, he's got the expertise. So a lot to get to with Eno. So want to give a quick shout out to OG's, sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Be on the lookout for new menu items. Always hit up OG's whenever you got a game to watch. We're in the break of the NFL play. Obviously got the Super Bowl coming up, NBA. Golf is going full swing. So whatever you want to check out, OG's is a great place to do it. You can take advantage of their loyalty program. It's super easy. You can do it online, earn loyalty points, rewards, exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And ordering online from OG's, it is easier than ever to get OG's straight to your door. Without further ado, the walk-up music. Thanks, as always, for checking out the On Fire podcast. Got a good one today. He is a busy man, kind enough to fit us into his packed schedule these days, and always excited to catch up with Eno Sarris. Eno, how are you, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
It's been a minute, and so glad we were able to connect. And again, thanks for making time for us. I always like to get kind of the big picture view, especially when we have folks on who have kind of a broader baseball perspective, aren't so just kind of like laser focused on the Padres. It has been quite the offseason for the franchise, and everything that has happened. Obviously, there's the passing of Peter Seidler, and then on the baseball side, Juan Soto, so many different changes. This team kind of going a different direction just in terms of how much they're able to spend. When you take inventory of everything, particularly on the baseball side, like what do you make of where the Padres are after like a couple seasons where you felt like they could really do something, they're going for it, and now kind of scaling back a little bit?
I think to some extent, a little bit of chickens coming home to roost in terms of maybe an over aggressiveness with signings. Xander Bogaerts has been fine, but just adding that contract to everything, I think in essence cost them Juan Soto, just because Soto was the more movable asset. It's a little bit harder to move these really long contracts right now in baseball. And so, those are some, once you make those decisions, though, one thing I will say is that leadership of the Padres has no problem, just moving on, like making aggressive moves again, and like not worrying so much about, what the optics of it would be, or, how it'll land with the fan base, but just realizing that this team needed pitching depth, more than almost anything else. And dealing with one of the few teams that was able to give them like major league ready pitching, and 3 of them. I mean, there's like, if you think about that, there's no other team that was going to give them 3, major league and near major league type arms. Nobody else has that type of pitching depth that's willing to part with it, really. So I think, it wasn't something that you're like, run to the presses with, but I really like Michael King, and I like the other 2 arms as well that they got in the deal, and it filled their biggest need. And I have some hope that they have enough in the holster to try and help that outfield, which I see as sort of the biggest need. And, offensive needs in the outfield are not as hard to fill as pitching depth when you need, 3, 4, 5 arms. I mean, how many innings were they giving up? 700 innings they lost in the offseason. That's a lot to try and find on the open market.
Are you suggesting they shouldn't play just 2 outfielders all year?
There's some fun guys in the minors. I just saw Jacob Marcy in the Arizona Fall League. And maybe they could convert who's the second, third
Jackson
baseman?
Merrill.
No, the second, third baseman who's Graham
Pauly.
Oh, Graham Pauly,
yeah. Just in terms of like they're older. I mean, I love Jackson Merrill. Maybe he could be a center fielder, but they're older and they're right at the cusp of the big leagues and seem ready to go. And I figure that they'll be part of the Padres story this year, but I think they'll also maybe get like a veteran who starts the season with them and then, allows them to, if Marcy's still, killing the minor leagues, to bring him up instead. So I think they have options, and they'll add a little bit, maybe not a big name, but somebody in the outfield that'll help them in the short term.
We've seen a lot of pitchers go from starting to relieving and have great success. Eric Gagne comes to mind. We don't often see guys go from relieving to starting and get better. And it looked like Michael King did that. What do the numbers say about him? Is this an outlier because it was a small sample size, or is he really just more cut out to be a starting pitcher?
He, at his heart, is, he's got a sinker and a sweeper. So he's got these 2 pitches that have big platoon splits. And as a righty, you'd think he'd have trouble against lefties. But he has a really underrated 4-seam and changeup. And so it really is a wide arsenal. It's 4 pitches. And as you said, he kept his velo when he went to starting, and he kept it at 95. That's the thing that I was really watching, because when he was a reliever, when he was a starter before, he didn't have the velo. When he went to relieving, he was 96, and he was lights out every time he was on the mound. He kept a lot of that velo. I think he's going to be great. The only issue is that he's had trouble staying healthy. That's why he was gettable. That's why he could be put in this deal, because otherwise you have a young ace. That's how much I like his stuff. I mean, I have these personal projections that are based on Stuff Plus, which is a number that like looks at their, the physical characteristics of their pitches. I've got a 3.39 ERA projection for Michael King. And right now the league average, that might not sound great to some people, different time periods, but right now the league average ERA is 4.30. So that would be one of the better ERAs out there. In fact, guys with 3.30 ERAs got votes for the Cy Young this year.
Over how many starts and how many innings?
That's a good one. Yeah, you're right to the matter of it. I think I've got him. I did hand innings projections, and I think I put about 141 for him innings wise.
I'll take that. Yeah.
And I was just looking at this, and obviously worth checking out Eno's fantasy starting pitcher rankings, which are on The Athletic. And you and I were chatting briefly before we went on. You guys did pitching, but you did every position, right? Fantasy rankings. And I was kind of bouncing around here and listening to what you guys had to say about guys like Tatis and Machado and some of the arms. And if you're a baseball junkie and already not on this, check it out, because again, just a crazy wealth of information. And obviously, if you want to hear about certain guys, you can do that as well. But I was looking at just, hey, where are some of these Padres slotted? And you've got Joe at 26, and then I see Michael King there at 32nd. I wasn't sure where he would slot in, given he's making that transition. The numbers were phenomenal, but what was it, like 8 starts, to close out his season? And so I thought that was impressive and really encouraging from a Padres standpoint. I think you have just a few slots down that, Michael King is that highly thought of. Again, we know kind of like the talent is there, but projecting success to that extent as a starter, I think says a lot.
I think any one of these 3 could have a season like Blake Snell just had, in terms of, any one of these 3 could have a Cy Young type season, can be your number 1, maybe a little bit skewed towards the younger guys and Joe and Michael. But Darvish's injury that he just had sounds really gross and strange, because it's like the oleocrodal. I don't know. It's like this weird bone in his elbow. But in fact, he's had that injury before, and he bounced back really well the next year. So I think the time off will benefit him as an old man. I like time off. And so I think those 3 are quality. And I think the real key to the deal, as much as it was getting Michael King, was getting like Michael King's replacement when he has to go to the IL. So, I like Randy Vasquez and Johnny Brito. I like them actually a little bit more than my model. So my model says they're going to be kind of league average guys, and that's great. In fact, like if you think about it, they've had trouble with that, right? Remember Weathers and remember, Avila was credible, but I think if you watched him, you're like, I'm not sure he'd do this again if we reacted, like we could depend on him to do this again. Waldron has been kind of fun as a knuckleballer, but do you want him as a fourth starter or whatever? Do you want him in there every day, every 5 days? So
if he commits to the knuckleball, yes, that's what I want to see. Like when he commits to the knuckleball, he's actually pretty good. The first couple of starts, he threw like 14 knuckleballs. He's like, I thought you were a knuckleballer. Throw it 80 times.
He's one of the rare knuckleballers that throws other pitches. I don't think I've ever seen it. It's fun to watch, but maybe not if you're the manager or the pitching coach. But I think Vasquez and Brito will at least be league average. What I like about them is they have this thing that I think that leads to breakouts. And, what it is they have lots of pitches, they have lots of credible pitches. And if you are a pitching coach, that's something you want because you're like, okay, you've demonstrated the ability to add pitches, do things with them, mix them, command them. You have major league pitches. Hey, let's add some drop to this one, or let's see if we can add some sweep to this one, or have lots of different chances to tweak a pitch and have them sort of take off. I think Brito's curveball is an out pitch. I think his sinker is really good. So he might have a little bit of an edge in terms of stuff. Vasquez has a little bit more command, and they both just have multiple pitches and could break out.
That Vasquez, I mean, he made his first big league start against the Padres. I remember watching that game going, who is this kid? He's the arm maybe that I'm most excited about because maybe it's because I saw it against that pretty good offense, against that good lineup, and was really impressed with what he did. What's the upside on him? And again, this is one of those guys who was like, okay, you can give him a chance to start, and then he's going to be okay in the bullpen if he doesn't make it there. Do you see him sticking in the starting rotation given all the kind of unknown options that they're bringing to spring training with him next week?
I do think that if one of these guys is not starting, they will be in the minors starting. One of the great things about them is they have options left, and that's really important when you're trying to build a staff. You want to have somebody you can bring up and send down, bring up if somebody's hurt, that sort of deal. So I think they'll continue starting them, partially because of what I just said. They have lots of pitches, you can take a lot of starters and put them in the bullpen, like you said, and make them better. So they can do that at some point. But right now, the real need, I think, is in starting pitching. So I figure that Randy will make the opening day rotation, and maybe Brito will be in the minors. But both these guys are going to pitch 70 to 100 innings, 120. I think combined, you'll get 200 plus innings out of these two guys. And that's super important. Which one do I like better? I might like Brito a little better. That sinker curve combo is pretty nice. Vasquez, though, really good changeup. Started throwing a sweeper and has a good curveball. So he's a 6-pitch pitcher. What I was saying, like, if you like 4 pitches, how about 6? So
that's what Joe Musgrove throws.
May I introduce you to Yu Darvish?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
29 pitches later,
the baby Darvish package. But
that's the thing. I want to see Yu Darvish. Like you see in offensive coordinators in football, like Andy Reid, the first 15 plays are scripted. I want to see Yu Darvish script all 11 of his pitches. Just throw them all in. Start a game. Here's all 11 things I got. Here we go.
Bring back the Supreme.
Yes.
Do you agree with what Michael King told the New York Post, that he thinks the Padres won the Juan Soto trade?
Oh, I love players, man. The hubris is great. No, I mean, Juan Soto, I think, is probably a generational player. Although, Padres fans did start to see some of the flaws. I think that'll keep him, honestly, from like the $400 or $500 million deal that he's looking for, because anybody who watched the Padres games knows he's not a good defender. I thought he was a better defender, going into it, but he kind of demonstrated that's maybe out the window. Maybe he's headed for first base sometime soon. And he's not a good, not a good base runner. But at the plate, man, I do think it's the baby Ted Williams kind of package. It's great ability to get on base and great power, and great contact. He's a great hitter.
If they don't re-sign him, the Padres did in fact win the Juan Soto trade.
Yeah, that's right, because they'll still have something next year when the Yankees won't have anything.
Does that mean the Nats won the Juan Soto trade?
Right, they still have players.
One guy that didn't come up talking about the Yankees is Drew Thorpe. And he coming off a really impressive 2023 season. He seemed like a guy who was getting close, but you don't necessarily hear him talked about as a guy that could kind of emerge during the spring. Like what do you like about him? And if we're talking like timeline, what would be like what would a comfortable runway look like?
Well, I mean, one thing I do like about him is just demonstrated results, but that doesn't always port over. But, if you want to talk about, great minor league numbers, usually you talk about like 28% is a good strikeout rate in the minors. He has struck out like 36% of the batters he's seen in the minors, and just really blown through the minors. Some people feel that the fastball is not impressive, but from the numbers I've seen on terms of fastball movement, I think it's one of these like pitches with ride from an interesting slot that it's kind of doesn't scout that well. So you might go to a game, get him on the gun and be like, he's 92, 93. Fastball looks straight to me. I think this is going to get beat up in the majors. But the advanced statistics, the kind of stuff that's in Stuff Plus, what I've seen likes his fastball. And that's kind of why I created Stuff Plus, because I think that fastball shape is really hard to scout. I think it's really hard to see, like when a fastball jumps on somebody, when it has good ride, I think that's hard to scout.
So we shouldn't be like getting Casey Kelly vibes or Casey Fossum, where it's like, hey, good minor league numbers just does not translate to the major leagues at all because the fastball is not dominant.
I won't tell you there aren't people that think that is that, but I'm in the other camp. I think he's going to be good.
We just watched Michael Wacha have a really good season, and he's not blown it by anybody, but he locates really well and has a good mix. And when I was reading up on Drew Thorpe, I was like, oh, maybe there's some similarities there just in how they might go about their business. And
actually, that's not bad, because Fangraphs has a 70 changeup grade and a 70 command grade. And that might be the Michael Wacha starting package, starter package. If you're talking about his best pitch, Michael Wacha's best pitch is his changeup, and why did it work? When it worked, it was because of his command. So,
yeah. Jamie Moyer wasn't throwing hard when he was 49 years old, getting guys out. You can make it work.
Yeah, it does put pressure on that changeup to be such a good pitch that everybody in the box is thinking about the changeup. Because otherwise they'll go after your fastball, and that's all they'll see.
There's a really interesting mix in the bullpen, and as I mentioned off the top, they add Wandy Peralta. Now, not official as at the point that we're recording, but it appears that they are going to add Wandy Peralta, who's coming off a few really good seasons. You've got Usuck Go and Yuki Matsui from Korea and Japan. Josh Hader's gone. Some of the guys that have been Luis Garcia after a rough season is gone. Tim Hill, who's the guy that pitched in some big spots. They're gone. I don't really know what to make of it, because I think it's like an exciting, fun bullpen. I can't figure out if it's a good bullpen, but it's probably going to be a bullpen that's going to have to pitch a bunch of innings.
Yeah, it's true with the veteran crew that they've got here. I have some stuff numbers on Matsui from the WBC where they actually used the American ball. And it looks like his fastball is good. The model didn't like his secondaries, but I only got like 5 changeups and 2 sliders. So for a model that still is good in small samples, that's a very small sample. So I'll just say the fastball looks like it's good, and that's super important for relievers. So I think he's interesting. Usuck Go is also interesting, like really nice curveball, good velo. The command is the question. I'm a big Steven Wilson supporter. So I think they've got credible relievers, and they're just hoping that one of them steps forward to be a real setup guy. And I also believe in Robert Suarez as a closer. I think that last year some of the injury sapped him of command, if not necessarily like a ton of velo. That, command can show up in lots of different ways. Like, it doesn't always just show up in the walk rate. Sometimes it shows up in the strikeout rate. And so I think it's helpful that he was 98, and I think his breaking ball command will be better, and I think he'll be a closer.
Going back to Matsui, what to say about the split? Because that's everything I read about him was a splitter from the left side, and it's going to be some like ridiculous weapon that nobody in baseball has ever seen.
Yeah, that's the stuff model has a harder time with changeups, and then it wants more to look at them. And like I said, I got 5 of them, so I would trust it though.
The finger registers as the changeup on that.
Yeah, that's what Statcast was calling it. But I would say that there's been a lot of players that have come over from Japan where the split finger has gotten even better. Because if you think about it, they use a sticky ball with kind of raised seams. And the thing that you kind of want with a split finger is for it to kind of almost like a knuckleball or something. You kind of want it to kind of slip out and spin less. And you want to feel the spin on it. And so if they're decent at doing that with a sticky ball with raised seams, they're going to come over here with the cue ball. And, I talked to Iwamura, the Mariners pitcher that came over, pretty extensively about this, and Maeda. Both of them had much better split fingers in America than they had in Japan.
What does the Stuff Plus say about Tom Cosgrove's slider?
Is that the big sweeper?
Yeah, sweeper.
Maybe here now. We're going with a left-handed rookie reliever slider.
I mean, it's a fun pitch, and this is he came off a really good season, and he's a guy that's going to probably be thrust into more leverage situations now.
And he picked up throwing it at
really
the end of the 2022 season too. Like he hadn't even thrown it for a full year before he got called up.
It really likes it. I will say it doesn't love his fastball. So, but it almost looks like he pitches backwards. I mean, I've in my sample here, I've got 437 sliders, 190 sinkers, and 200 fastballs. So. I think he's pitching backwards off that thing. And I remember watching it, and I think it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those Frisbee things. I don't know if you make someone like that your closer, because he can't ever in like a 2-0 count be like, I'm going to rear back and just throw 99. He doesn't have that in the tank.
Well, I asked Soto about it when Cosgrove came up, and he was like, I saw that thing in spring training, man. That's nasty. And that's pretty high praise. I'm a guy who's a pretty darn good hitter.
And he made Shohei Ohtani look bad on a couple occasions. So, I mean, it's
going to be a huge weapon for lefties, that sideways. It's basically a sweeper. And so that sideways, going like they'll see it and they'll think it's going to be in the zone. And it's going to be like a foot out of the zone.
We heard sweeper all of a sudden a ton last year. And I know people have written about it, but if you were to give us just kind of the idiot's guide to sweepers and sliders, what are the differentiating factors?
Well, one of the things that's important about doing about calling it a sweeper, and people say, well, slurves existed or this pitch existed before. Yes, it did. But I would say, it's not a slurve. One thing that's different about slurves are 2 plane pitches. They are big, they go down and they go sideways. That's a slurve. A sweeper is designed to not drop. It's not supposed to drop. It's supposed to drop less, and it's due to some physical properties of the pitch and where the seams are. But it's designed to not drop as much as the hitter thinks. So the hitter sees the spin, and they think slurve, but then they often will swing under the sweeper because the sweeper stays high, but it goes sideways really far. And one of the reasons why it's important to separate that out is guys will have multiple sliders now. This is such a slider league. They'll have what's called a bullet slider or gyro slider. So they'll have like an 89 mile an hour, like just a little, direct slider. That's called a gyro slider. That's what we call now, I guess, a slider. And then they'll have like an 85, 86 mile an hour sweeper. That's Michael King throws that. It's just sideways and doesn't drop. And so we're just trying to be a little bit more precise about it, especially because if you're Ruben Niebla, you want to be precise. You want to be able, if you're the catcher, you want to be precise. You don't want to have one finger, 2 fingers down, just be slider. You want to be like, no, sweeper or gyro. You want to have different signs for this. Otherwise, you're going to get crossed up. Ball's going to go flying, whatever it is. If you're the pitching coach, you want to have precision of you want to be able to say to the player, hey, we want to give you a sweeper. Then they know what you're talking about. and you can go from there, you know? So
how does the sweeper differ from the cutter, and why would a pitcher throw one versus the other? Biomechanics, I would assume.
Well, in terms of just like physical properties, cutters are usually within like 3 to 4 miles an hour of the fastball. And yes, they are sideways, but they don't drop as much. So that's a similar thing, but they're harder and they're smaller. So a cutter will have 3 inches of sideways movement. And like if you throw 94, your cutter will be 90 and it'll have 3 inches of sideways movement. Your sweeper will be 85 and have 10 or 11 or 12 inches of sideways movement. So it's kind of something like a super cutter, a sideways curveball, and the mechanics of it are more like a sideways curveball. You hold it like a curveball and you're trying to get sort of sideways movement on it. So it's you know, if you want to call it a slurve, it's more like a sideways curveball or a rising slider is what other people call it. It's a sweeper.
But you could call it what the folks in Atlanta called it when they didn't know what Steven Wilson was throwing. They called it a slutter.
There you go. That's right. That's right. Exactly.
I do like super cutter. That's kind of rad. I would maybe try and coin that.
And then you get the haircut company to sponsor it.
That's perfect. Perfect.
Got super cutter.
Make some money off this deal. Derek mentioned the outfield situation. This is a roster with a bunch of holes to fill. If you were AJ Preller, who would you be calling? Whether it's on the free agent market, trade partners, you know, a lot of talk
Randy
about
Arozarena. Next question.
a lot of talk about the Rays, a lot of talk about the Marlins amongst the fan base. Is there a player or a situation or trade partner that you feel like could line up for the Padres given their needs?
So right now in the outfield, they've got Tatis and Azokar.
Yeah.
And Azokar is a righty or lefty?
Righty.
Righty. I have seen some talk of a Tommy Pham reunion, and I personally really respect Tommy Pham. He makes the most out of his physical tools, and I think he's a really smart hitter. He will get on base for you. I think he'll hit for power. So I think that's a decent one, but he's also a righty. So you know, are you looking for a lefty batter? I think you're shopping in the cheaper bin. So I think you're talking to maybe Eddie Rosario as someone you could talk to. Robbie Grossman, not as good defense as Eddie Rosario, but will get on base. And if you're kind of trying to replace Soto's on baseness, you know, that Robbie can do that for you. He can't do anything the other parts of the package as much. But you know, what you're just trying to do, I think, is to get a lefty, veteran lefty that you can put in there. Grossman's a switch hitter, but I mean, the dream would be Cody Bellinger on the open market. But you know, I think we both know that that's not in the offing. The Orioles may have an extra outfielder that's not too expensive. They're getting packed. You know, they kind of may want arms, so that's a little bit of an interesting mix. But I would definitely talk to the Orioles about Anthony Santander, or I guess Austin Hayes is a righty, but Anthony Santander might be an interesting guy to target. And then other thing is just like, get into the season, get going well, and just patch it over and hope that at the trade deadline, you know, there's a team that's struggling that has, you know, a rental outfielder that won't cost you much.
Would they be able to get a Heston Kjerstad out of Baltimore?
I think that'd be more expensive. You know, what would it cost them? You can't roll it out with AJ, you know, like he just dealt for a bunch of pitching. Would he deal like Snelling, who everybody wants to see and was the minor pitcher of the year last year and seems to be part of the future? And I think you should hold on to him. But would he, you know, just say, well, I just bought a bunch of pitching in, I'm going to send some pitching out and try to get Heston? Like, you know, maybe you do something like that. You don't see deals like that very often, where it's like my prospect for your prospect, you know, without anything else. Like, but you know, Preller is the kind of guy that would do something you hadn't seen before.
Snelling, though, man, he had linebacker offers from half the SEC. Like, I want that guy's mentality in my system.
Yeah. The numbers are great. I think everyone seems, you know, he seems like he's very close to going, and you may need somebody that you can bring up, in the second half of the season that's sort of a surprise, like especially if you make the playoffs, like a guy who like is your third starter in the playoffs that the other team hasn't seen that much, like that would
Jairo
be,
Iriarte.
yeah, that'd be well. The one that really sticks out for me is a K-Rod. Back in 2002, the Giants were on their way to a World Series, and K-Rod just blew through the entire playoffs because nobody had seen him, and they just brought him up in October.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, you kind of touched on it earlier. I mean, you mentioned kind of a stopgap outfielder for the deadline. Is it also maybe a stopgap outfielder for Jackson Merrill and Jacob Marcy, and hope those guys get a couple months in them and they're hitting really, really well, and you think, okay, maybe by the All-Star break, you know, okay, thanks, you've served us well, but now we're going to turn it over to the young guys.
That's what I think. If it's like Robbie Grossman or Eddie Rosario, you sign those guys and you know, you hope that they're good, but they're also near the ends of their careers. And like, if they aren't, then they go pretty easily into a bench situation. And it wouldn't be bad to have a free swinging Eddie Rosario lefty type on your bench, you know, and have Marcy starting the games and just be like, yeah, we need someone that could hit a homer from anywhere from his eyebrows to his ankles, you know. That's Eddie Rosario, you know, like, so I, you know, I think that there's going to be like a veteran, who comes in there, and, you know, honestly, it's going to be a veteran and it's going to be a rookie. So is it going to be Cal Mitchell? Is Grant Pauly going to make the team as a corner outfielder? It's totally possible. Cause if you put this together in your mind, you say Tatis, Alzheimer, and the veteran guy, you still have room for a fourth outfielder. Yeah, you know, you still have somebody who needs to be on that team.
So Jazz Chisholm comes up a lot on this podcast. What are the odds of ripping him out of Miami?
They have been looking for offense forever. They're always looking to trade pitching for offense. I don't think that's necessarily, you know, one of the things that they're looking at right now.
And he kind of solidified center field for them. And so then to take him out, it's like, okay, now we're causing another problem.
I mean, if you gave him like Marcy, if you gave him a hitting package, but the thing that's hard about doing that kind of trade right now is that most teams right now, like I know this from fantasy, like any in your keeper leagues and stuff, everyone's like, I'm excited for the season. I'm hopeful. We're building. We're going to be competitive this year. You know, at the trade deadline, you get the, oh man, this sucked. Yeah, you can have my, you know what I mean? Like right now, it's kind of hard to like go to the Marlins who have been trying to build and have new leadership and be like, yeah, like, can you rebuild now on February 1? Like, you want to start a rebuild?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that they're going to do that.
Why is Blake Snell unsigned?
I think Padres fans know the answer to that. You know, I think that he had some amazing times there, but you know, he also had some
walking 19 hitters a game, probably. Yeah, there you go. I mean, then they wanting $250 million for it.
That's a big one, but I think also, like, you know, there was the year where he pitched a ton and was great, but there are also years where he didn't, and so, you know, there was 2022 when he had 128 innings, and 2021 where he had 128 innings. So I think if you're a team that's like, are we going to sign you to the, like, used to be injured and had a good season contract? Like, are you like, there's that like $125 million contract that Gossman and Robbie Ray got when they had like good platform years, but shaky backgrounds. So are we giving you the 125, the new version of that maybe is a $150 million deal? Or do you want the, like, I'm an ace, like, you know, look what Cole got and look what, you know. So I think that's where the spread is. It's like teams are like, we'll give you $150 million right now. And he's like, well, I want 250. Yeah. So maybe he'll end up where the Carlos Rodon contract was. So 170. Right. Because
that's what I think the comp is for him, probably. Yeah.
Because Rodon had injury risk and a really great platform year. So, you know, all of the guys who are left have flaws in I think there's like a real, like, Boris. I think they're all Boris clients too. Mm. So Boris is like, no, this is the number we get. And the teams are like, yo, Matt Chapman, like, had like a 500 OPS in the second half last year, and like we're like a little bit worried about that. And Cody Bellinger stopped hitting the ball hard. Like, I don't know about that, you know. Blake Snell had 128 innings a year for, all those other years. So, that's the kind of conversation you're hearing between the agents and the GMs right now.
The Snell scares me because he has a great year going into his contract year. The other time he had a real great year when he won the Cy Young Award, he was about to hit arbitration. So when there's money on the line, Blake Snell is really, really good. When there's not, Blake Snell is really, really talented.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that predicts future injury is past injury. So, I know that some of those injuries were strange. I think he said
hip adductor and
no, but he also dropped like a bathroom tile on his toe or something. there was some weird stuff, weird ones in there. I don't know if that's very predictive of future injury, but the other stuff was. And
well, he can afford people to do his own bathroom tiles now, so that one's out the window.
Like the Jeremy Affeldt injury history that he had going on for a little while there. Steve was asking, when can we actually see a move for the outfielder? I wish we had an answer for that question, but I guess in terms of the market, like talking about Snell, talking about Bellinger, all these guys are still available. It's not just the Padres. Curious why you think that is just kind of like, I mean, we see guys sign, and Michael Wacha came during spring training, that sort of thing. Maybe for the Padres, it's just them being in this kind of tricky situation where they have maybe one valuable trade asset in Ha-seong Kim, who they probably don't want to part with, and Jake Cronenworth, they might, but harder to deal. And
they do want to trade Jake. Yeah. They would love to do that right now.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. They would like to, but
if other teams see it as underwater, though, you remember how hard it was with Eric Hosmer. You can trade the type of underwater contracts that people are trading is Anthony DeSclafani, 1 year and $12 million. That has been traded twice in this offseason. That you can trade, but I think Jake is like 5 and 80 or 90.
Yeah,
it's like 7 and 80 or something like that.
So I'm sorry if they think that's not. I'm not trying to be rude to the player or whatever. I actually like him as a player, but you have to think about the player and the contract. And if they think that contract is underwater, then it takes a lot. You have to start attaching major prospects to the player just to get him released. It took some prospects to get Eric Hosmer out of town, and that only saved them. That didn't even save them that much money. They ended up on the hook for a fair amount of that end of that
for this year and next year still.
Yeah. See, we know that Jake's contract does not have value as a first baseman. Does it at least get to treading water if he's a second baseman?
Well, let's see. I'll do my. Some people hate this, the sort of Fangraphs production dollars per WAR mojo. But right now, it has him projected for basically 2 wins. So he's an average player, and 2 wins should be worth about $20 million a year. So in that respect, you think, oh, great. That actually works out okay. He's got 7 years and $80 million on it. So why not give him that? Well, you at 30 years old, you start aging that production a half a win a year. So you'd say it'd be 2 years in the first year, 1.5 in the next year, 1 in the next year, and he'd basically be a replacement player in the 4th year of that deal. So years 5, 6, and 7 are all underwater. Yeah. They're just paying $11 million for nothing. That's what this sort of the bare naked stats say.
So, yeah, but that's 5 years from now. We don't worry about 5 years from now.
You just need to find somebody who agrees with you.
real quickly, because then I know we got to let you go, but I was, again, listening to the third base episode, and you brought up Manny, talking about a guy who, there's probably some concerns about like how he's going to age and making a lot of money and all that. And you had a pretty optimistic outlook on him, just given, him coming off the injury, the essentially tennis elbow, and how, we maybe shouldn't be sounding any alarms yet. And this, we could be seeing Manny Machado be Manny Machado for a little while still.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I thought was amazing was that he still slugged .530 in September when he was, whatever he needed to get fixed needed to be fixed, like he was hurt. And it wasn't, I'm just saying, the best month, but he still hit for some power. He hit 30 homers in a year that he spent at least 4 or 5 of those weeks, with tennis elbow and playing DH half the time. He hit a ball 114.5 miles an hour. That's, top 10th of the league. top 10th percentile in the league. He still hits the ball super, super hard. And his strikeout rate after a 1-year blip in 2022 went right back to where it is. So he's got plus contact, decent eye, plus raw power. He goes on tears where he turns that raw power into homers. And he was such a good defender that I think you can sort of fall off that and be okay. So I know maybe it's going to be, 2-3 weeks where, he has to ease his way back in. I actually think, that the spring will be enough and he'll be playing at third base by opening day. But I mean, just think about I think he's a really good healer and he has a really high pain threshold. He's playing through tendonous elbow, through all that. Remember that ankle that he blew?
Yeah, in Colorado.
And I've been told that ankle was like other people would have had surgery and he didn't. I think he might have gone on the IL, but he went on the IL for the minimum and came off.
No,
whatever.
he didn't. He missed 8 games.
That's right. He didn't even go on the IL. So that was a really bad injury. I think part of his genius is that he'll play through injury. He'll still be good through injury.
Yeah.
So you haven't seen the full drop off. Last year wasn't one of his best years, but he could easily have 4 wins as an all-star season. At least one projection system has him projected for 4 wins again. So, projected to be an all-star.
Yeah. And that's, he also had his broken hand when he got hit. One of the things that actually took him out of the lineup was he literally couldn't hold a bat and he still wanted to stay out there.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about Pedro Avila as a potential starting option for the Padres? He looked good at times last year. He actually had a pretty good stretch toward the end of the season. I'll give you time to vamp to pull up the numbers here.
Yeah.
And then he did have a couple of bumps in the road, but again, he was basically, a rookie last year. So what is the projection for him? And can he be one of these guys who, even if he's not, as you said, a guy who's starting on opening day, but he is starting in the minor leagues, we're going to have to rely on him for probably a few of those 700 plus innings this year, correct?
Yeah, I think of him as a guy that you can rely on in short stretches, but I don't necessarily see ace upside because none of his hard pitches register as that good by Stuff Plus. You also saw some natural command issues that did show in the major leagues. His AAA numbers are skewed by the fact that they had the automatic balls and strikes down there. And so, I don't know. I think his command will be a little better going forward, but I think he's kind of the kind of guy who, in 7 innings strikes out 5 or 6 and walks 3 or 4. So it's not like, I don't think it's an ace package, but
so he's Blake Snell.
No, Blake Snell would strike out 10.
That's right.
And walk 6 or 7, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But not give up any runs. I mean,
I like the change up. I think he's okay, but I think that the guys that they got in Brito and Vasquez, I have ahead of him in terms of quality.
Blake Snell is the Saving Private Ryan of pitchers. It's so hard to watch, but it's also just really, really good.
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug on the site or from the pod?
Hey, that's funny you say that because my kids are in Little League, and in Little League, nobody has command, and so there's just walk after walk, and it's so painful. And the one thing you can do in Little League to get more playing time and be put on the mound, and for every coach to be like, "Oh, thank God," is to throw strikes.
That's funny,
but we don't actually ask that out of our major leaguers as much.
How's your kid's Stuff Plus?
We're working on it. Plus 4-seamer. He's working on he's got a knuckle curve. We can't throw it too much, but if you watch the Little League World Series, there's like a 12-year-old out there ripping curveball after curveball. And you have these coaches being like, you can't throw the curveball. I'm like, that guy didn't just pick it up. That guy's been throwing that curveball for 3 or 4 years. Come on. Come on. So I let him at the end of fastball practice,
Nice.
Command practice. I let him rip some curveballs and he gets really excited about it. So.
Yeah, I'm sure he enjoys that. Well, definitely check out the pod, Rates and Barrels, and keep up with Eno's work on The Athletic. Thanks so much. Great catching up. Hope to see you down in San Diego before too long. And again, thanks for your time.
I'll be down there. Yeah, and I've got closer rankings up tomorrow. So that's the newest stuff. But thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks, is the closer to rank for the Padres?
I've got Suarez. It's Suarez.
There you go.
Done. Thanks, Eno.